Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, South Carolina. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs here in the Greenville area, even outside the Greenville area. I've got a relocations department that I work with for people moving from Greenville to outside of the Greenville area, so please let me know. My contact information is right there in the show notes. Just a reminder, as always, please like, rate, review, subscribe, all of those good things when it comes to the show. Make sure you don't miss future episodes. You certainly don't want to do that. And yeah, like I said, if you can leave a rating or a review, I've said this to you guys before, anything like that really helps the show, get the show out to as many people as possible. So I'd appreciate greatly if you guys can do that. Today, we're going to be talking about the market stats, finally released by the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors. I was starting to sweat this out, right? Because I'm about to go out of town, and I have recorded podcasts when I've been out of town before, but it's not ideal. You know, a lot of this equipment does not travel well. And as I've been, gradually making this podcast, the production quality, particularly now of the video, better. I don't want to, have to then have an episode where it's much worse because I'm having to set up in a mobile station, while traveling. Thankfully, right before, I'm going out of town tomorrow on the day that I'm recording this, they finally released these market stats, which I go over with you guys every month. And there's some very interesting tidbits in here that I want to cover and go over. And particularly, I want to compare what's happening right now to what's happened historically. And so if you are not normally one to watch on YouTube, this would actually be a great episode to watch on YouTube. I'm still going to try to make it friendly to the ears so that you can track if you're just a listener. But I'm going to have a lot of graphs and charts and whatnot on YouTube as I screen share, which I am doing right now. All right. So we're just going to do this the way we always do this and start right at the top with new listings. So new listings data came in very strong for the month of June. Now, remember, even though these stats are coming out in July is not over yet. We always get usually mid to late July, mid to late time of the month, the numbers for the previous month. And there's even a few numbers that I will go over with you guys that are not accurate for the most recent month, but we have to look back 2 months. And I have no explanation for that. But we'll start with new listings. This data usually is accurate for the most recent month. All these numbers get revised and tweaked slightly in future months. But this number usually ends up being very close in future months to the number that it's currently at. So June 2024, the new listings data, as I've already said, extremely strong. It came in 2,152 new listings. That was a 10.1% increase year on year from the 1,955 new listings we had in June 2023. Now, if you're looking on YouTube, you will notice that I have circled 3 different dots on the dot plot or dot chart that shows all the historical new listings going all the way back to 2007. Going all the way back to 2007, we have only had 4 times before this year where new listings data came in over 2,000. There was 1 month in 2019 where new listings peaked out just over 2,000. There was 1 month in 2021. The same thing happened. There were 2 months in 2022 where the new listings data came in over 2,000. And now we have 4 straight months of data in 2024 with new listings over 2,000. So in the history of Greenville, as far back as we have this data, we'd only had 4 times ever where new listings had been over 2,000. And now in 2024, we have had 4 straight months of new listings data over 2,000. What in the world is happening? I think a few things. I think the quote unquote lock-in effect that we've heard people talk about, where people are locked in with the golden handcuffs of a 2.5%, 3%, 3.5% interest rate. They've been holding off for several years now, and they're finally reaching that point where they're like, you know what? I have a job change or or an opportunity for a job change. I've got, children, we're busting at the seams. I've got, this or that, whatever reasons, the reasons that people typically move. People have been putting that off for a while now. And I think that it's just kind of reached a tipping point where people no longer, a lot of people can no longer wait. We've also got, and some of this new listings data is going to be some of the new construction that, as new construction has slowed down, some builders have opted to put more of their listings in MLS. I don't think that is playing a huge role. I think what I said before is playing a much bigger role, that people who would prefer not to move with the higher interest rate environment that we have right now because they have a lower interest rate, they're just kind of like, you know what? We don't have a choice. I've seen some investment properties that people purchased the past couple of years as investments, realizing that those weren't very good investments, and now they're listing those to sell. Just a whole lot of things going on here. But it's remarkable. It's truly remarkable that we have 4 straight months with new listings data over 2,000. And I mean, the last 3 months, it's been over 2,100. So this is a tremendous development, and something that we certainly have to keep track of. Now, we're right around the time that we oftentimes start to see a big dive off in the new listings data. We had a weird last year. It kind of bounced up and down. But if you look at a traditional year, new listings data forms kind of a nice little mountain top, a nice little peak, usually in June or July, sometimes in May. It just kind of depends on the year. And so that is what it looks like we're seeing right now, with new listings data appearing to have peaked out probably around the month of April. Is probably going to end up being the strongest month of the year. The question is, how much of a drop off are we going to see from June to July? Because I still see a lot of new listings coming online right now. It would not shock me. I mean, we still have the latter half of July to happen, but it would not shock me if we saw a 5th straight month with new listings data over 2,000. So we'll see. So that is, we talk about supply and demand. That's the supply side of things. Supply really beefy right now, right? A lot of new listings data. Let's look at pending sales. Pending sales, this is one of the numbers that is always wrong for the most recent month. It's usually about 500 pending sales low. So the month of June, it said 950 pending sales. So that's probably about 500 off. So we can assume that will end up being revised to around like 1450. If that's true, that will end up being a slight increase year on year over June 2023, which was 1401. So I would anticipate we'll see a slight increase year on year in pending sales for the month of June. But let's look back at May. I made a similar prediction for the month of May when we did these stats last month, and I was right on the money. I thought it would be real close to being flat, or maybe a very, very slight increase, or the least likely scenario, I saw a very, very slight decrease year on year for May 2023. It ended up being right on the nose, the slightest of increases. So we had 1,461 pending sales for the month of May, and that was a 0.4% increase from the 1,455 pending sales of May 2023. So we had 6 more pending sales in May of this year versus May of last year. And so, again, very predictable, and as far as numbers go, how does this compare historically? Well, again, if you're looking at my chart on YouTube, you can see I drew a line across from this pending sale number, the month of May, all the way across the entire way. And here's what I find really interesting. It intersects very closely with May of 2019, but you really can't see this in the same resolution probably on YouTube that I can see it live. But May 2019 was slightly higher. So what does that mean? That means that demand in May of this year was ever so slightly lower than demand in May of 2019. That I've been talking about the market softening. That is one of the clearest indicators of a softened market when we have a month compared to a pre-pandemic month with and today's month or this year's month has less demand than the pre-pandemic month had. That tells me a lot. That tells me, again, that demand is really, really being destroyed right now. And again, it's by higher interest rates, and it's also a presidential election year, which I've said before, strangely impacts things. And so here we have a month that in a vacuum you could say, oh, well, that looks pretty good, right? That was in theory an increase year on year. Of a 0.4% increase year on year, but that's still lower than what our demand was back in 2019. Now, of course, May of 2023 was even lower. So I don't want to draw too many conclusions from this, but usually each year you start to see demand increasing, and here we are with really demand being flat, more or less year on year, but less than what it was pre-pandemic. So why is that important? Well, I just said that supply, at least from the standpoint of new listings, and we'll look at inventory here in a little bit, supply is hitting records right now, and demand is showing signs of some pretty severe softening. And so that's very interesting. By the way, if you're not able to see this, we've also now hit the backside of the mountain of pending sales. So we can now start to anticipate most likely that the rest of the year pending sales will start to fall off quite a bit in comparison to what it has been the past few months. Once we get past Memorial Day, typically we see a tremendous decrease in demand, and that appears to be what's happening now. Closed sales. Closed sales is usually accurate for the most recent month. So the month of June, we had 1,552 closed sales. That was a 2.9% decrease from June last year. Again, here's some of the things that I'm looking at that tells me that demand is weakening. We have our second month of the year so far with year-on-year closed sales less than what it was the year prior. And of course, this is directly correlated with the pending sales, which our pending sales numbers have been pretty weak the past few months. March was down 0.1% year on year. April was only up 1.9% year on year. May was only up 0.4% year on year. So those aren't great increases, and we're having a lot of contract falls through. Fall throughs. I just had a listing that had a contract fall through on it for the third time. Never in my career have I had that. It's honestly, it's very demoralizing when this sort of thing happens. And there's a lot of reasons. I could get into the weeds. It's a unique listing. There's a lot of reasons why that specific listing has had that happen, but it's noteworthy that never in my career have I had that happen before. And it just happened just this past week with one of my listings. And so that's why, even though pending sales might not seem dramatically less than, sometimes the pending sales numbers are misleading, I guess is what I'm saying, because a pending sale could end up falling under contract. What was unique about the environment during COVID, when we had pending sales hitting record highs, was that almost none of those were falling through. Almost no pending sales were falling through because buyers had to work so hard to get a home under contract that when they finally did, they just kind of had to accept it in whatever condition it was in, just had to deal with it. And they just didn't want to have to go back out there and have to look at another 15 homes, make offers on 10 of them, and get outbid on 9 of the 10. And so here we are now. Pending sales numbers are not super soft, but when you consider the data that we don't have in here, which is how many of these are falling through, I would say the pending sales numbers are quite soft. All right, so back to the closed sales. Again, the closed sale number is reflecting that with a minus 2.9% year on year number for the month of June. And the month of May was only up 1.9% year on year. And so we've now had 2 pretty soft months on closed sales. Now, if you're looking at the chart on YouTube, you'll notice I circled the month of June for going back basically to 2012, just to just to point out to you guys what's happening. So here's basically what has happened since 2012. Not every year has seen June exactly have year-on-year increases. It's not uncommon for there to be a month of a year that has a decrease for one reason or another. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the housing market. But generally speaking, it was a line that was going upward until COVID. Obviously, June 2020 was heavily impacted by COVID. But regardless, we see these start to continue to go up until just recently. And so the past 4 years, basically, these June closed sales numbers have started to get flat. And as I said, now it's gone down year on year. So that's something that we need to keep track of. Again, this is indicating that the market has not seen the traditional trends since COVID that we're used to seeing, and that's reflected in closed sales. Now, for the first time, are starting to indicate a trend going down historically versus going up historically, and I think that will only change if we see mortgage rates start to come down. Days on market until sale. It went down month on month. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Month on month, it went down from 46 days on market until sale until 40 days in June. So what that means is, on average, when a property is listed, between the time when a property is listed and when an offer is accepted, it takes about 40 days. So if you're planning to sell a house, budget in your mind for, on average, that it'll be 40 days before it goes under contract. Now, remember, that doesn't factor in the fact that that contract may fall through. As I've said, a lot of contracts are falling through right now. But that's just something to keep in the back of your head. How does that compare year on year? It's a slight increase. June of 2023 was at 39 days on market until sale, and now we're at 40. So that's, to me, a negligible increase year on year. This is still a number that is still lower than the pre-pandemic norms, although not dramatically lower. We had a few months during 2017 and 2018 that flirted with the number 40 as far as days on market. But still, in general, this is still a little bit lower. Homes are still, on average, going under contract a little bit quicker than what was happening pre-COVID. Let's look at median sales price. This is loosely the number that we look at to kind of track where the market's going. It's not a one-to-one correlation with home appreciation, but it is the closest that we have to being able to actually provide you a home appreciation number from a metadata standpoint. And here's what we have. A 0.3% increase year on year. So almost completely flat year on year. If you'll remember, May was flat year on year. Actually, they revised the May number to bring it down $10. So now May of 2024 was down $10 year on year versus May of 2023. That's, for all intents and purposes, a flat month year on year. June, pretty much the same. $320,900 was the median price point for June. So if someone asks you, hey, what does a home cost in Greenville? Well, during the summer months, our median is right around $320,000, and that's in June 2023. It was at $320,000 as well. So only a difference of $900 year on year, a 0.3% increase. And that's not quite the highest number. Well, hold on, let me see here. I don't believe that that's the highest number that we've ever seen. Yes, $324,900 in October of 2023 was the highest number that we've ever had with the median sales price. So it'll be interesting to see if we get something like that happen again this year, where we have in October, like a really high fall median sales price. That's not necessarily indicative of what normally happens historically, but that'll be interesting to watch. But I think that the takeaway here is that we've essentially had 2 flat months year on year in terms of prices. And I think that's particularly noteworthy because we have not had that really in like that as a trend in quite some time. What about the average sales price? Well, the average actually hit a new record. The reason why we don't focus too much on the average is because the average is heavily skewed by let's say there's a luxury home development with a bunch of $1 million homes that all sell within a short period of time. That's going to skew the data. Or let's say there's a bunch of really cheap homes that sell all at the same time. That's going to skew the data as well. But that being said, I think it's still interesting, and particularly interesting because it set a Greenville record for average at 402,501. That is the first time Greenville has ever crested the $400,000 mark in average home sale, and that's a 4.8% increase versus June 2023, which was 383,000, almost 384,000. So this is what we have now. We have the average sales price. If you want to truly know, if you want to truly say what the average is in Greenville, it's 402,500. And obviously that's a huge number, and home buyers are glad that we can rely more on the median at 320 and change versus the average at 402 and change. Apologies if you hear my dog freaking out in the background. I do not know what she's freaking out about. Percent of list price received. June's percent of list price received. This is the percentage found when dividing a property's sales price by its most recent list price, then taking the average for all properties sold in a given month, not accounting for seller concessions. June was 98.7%, which was a pretty big decrease, a 0.4% year-on-year decrease from June 2023. However, it is month-on-month the same. May was also 98.7%. So now we have 3 straight months where the percent of list price received has been lower year-on-year versus 2023. What does that mean? What it means is that sellers are not getting as much of the list price as what they were getting a year ago. So if you list a home for $100,000, on average, you can expect to get $98,700 for that home, although buyers are likely also going to ask for you to pay for some concessions as well. They're going to ask for you to pay for their closing costs or for rate buy downs or what have you. Again, we need to track this. This is pretty comparable to pre-pandemic norms. You could maybe argue it's slightly higher, but I mean it's right in line with what we saw, in 2018, 2019. So this is pretty, 98.7%. Honestly, sellers should be pretty happy with that number. Buyers probably would want to get that closer to just a flat 98%. But I don't see anything particularly noteworthy about that number at this time. But if it keeps falling year on year, then we'll have to see. If we see it go below 98%, that's when we know that we're starting to see, some things changing. I should say if it went below 98% during kind of the summer months. If it went below 98% during the winter months, that would be pretty much on par with what we saw pre-pandemic. Housing Affordability Index. This is the index which measures housing affordability for the region. For example, an index of 120 means the median household income is 120% of what is necessary to qualify for the median-priced home under prevailing interest rates. So a higher number means greater affordability. I just read that straight off the sheet. So we want the Housing Affordability Index to be 100 or higher. It has not been 100 all year with the exception of February. And the month of June was the same as the month of May, flat at 94. However, that is a 3.3% increase versus June 2023, which was at 91. So that's good. Housing became slightly more affordable in June 2024 versus June 2023. And that shouldn't come as a surprise. Why? Because prices were basically flat. Mortgage rates are probably slightly better than they were year on year, and income has gone up in the state of South Carolina the past year. Again, these are all averages, but that's good if you're a home purchaser. Housing affordability, when you factor in all of these different things, has gotten a little bit better. Inventory of homes for sale. Inventory for the most recent month is always an inaccurate number, so I'm not going to focus on that. Let's go back to May. May inventory number, and I predicted it would come in around this. I don't remember exactly what I predicted, but I thought it would be above 4,000. It was, in fact, above 4,000 for the first time in a very, very long time. For the first time since 2019. For the first time since 2020. I apologize. March 2020. I think something important happened during that month. we had inventory right around 4,000 during that month as well. But May came in at 4,189. That is a 41.6% increase year on year versus May 2023. That is a huge, huge increase. I think that might be the biggest year on year increase I have seen since I've tracked this. I'd have to go back and look at a bunch of my data, but massive increase. I mean, the difference between having less than 3,000 homes available to look at if you're a home buyer versus having almost 4,200. Again, it's a massive difference. And if you're a seller, that's not great news, right? Not great news at all, because now you're competing against a lot of other homes. Now, May was revised down from 4,700 and change, and so it came down a little more than 500 units of inventory once they revised the number. So what did June come in at with the inaccurate number? It came in at 4,845. So we can roughly anticipate that June will be revised to around 4,300 homes for sale. So this trend of having over 4,000 homes for sale at the end of a given month, which is what this metric tracks, appears to be here for at least a little bit. We can probably anticipate this will be for several more months, because June will probably be in the 43s, which is going to be a massive increase from June 2023. And then, it'll take a while for that inventory to get absorbed. And so I would anticipate that July and probably August, at the very least, will probably be elevated as well. We might see this go on with these numbers be above 4,000 for the majority of the remainder of the year. I don't think it'll be for the entire rest of the year, because if you're looking on YouTube, you can see the inventory does go down during the winter months, fall and winter months. So I would expect that to happen again this year. But we could see this elevated inventory now for quite some time. So by some metrics, this is a good time to buy, at least from the standpoint of options that buyers have. Now, if you're looking on YouTube, you'll see that I drew another line on here, and that is just to show where this inventory compares historically. So it's basically right on track with what inventory was in, I believe this is November of 2019. So inventory right now in June 2020, in May 2024, very comparable to what it was in November of 2019. And you can see it's very comparable to basically what inventory was throughout 2019, but it's actually a little bit higher than what it was in 2018, 2017. 2019, again, mortgage rates started to creep up a little bit from what they had been for several years, and that suppressed demand a little bit and caused supply to go up. And so that's some of what was happening there. Now, once this June number gets revised, if it's at around 4,300, like I think it will be, that's going to be comparable to the top end numbers that we had in 2019, maybe even above that. So that's going to be very interesting to see. We'll probably need to have a similar comparison once we get those revised numbers come in. Month supply of inventory. This is a bad number to look at for the most recent months, because it divides the two numbers we've already said are inaccurate: pending sales and inventory. That being said, it's still useful to look at least for 2 months ago. So 2 months ago, May, that number got revised to 3.2 months of inventory. Originally, when they published May numbers, they said 3.8 months. So it came down 0.6. And June also came in at 3.8. So that's going to be probably revised back down to 3.2 months of inventory as well. So we're still hovering here in the low threes of inventory. But that's a big increase from the low twos, which is where we were at last year. So May of 2023 was 2.3 months of inventory. That took a 39.1% increase this year to 3.2 May of 2024. So month supply, interesting data to look at. I've said before, I think if we started to approach 4 months of inventory, it would really feel like a buyer's market. I've had to revise that number a few different times. But I think right now, the way I feel based on everything I'm looking at, I think 4 months, and there's reasons for why that 4 month number traditionally people would say 6 months is when 6 months of inventory is when it starts to turn into a buyer's market. But remember, we've been at a deficit of supply for so long now, and now we're meeting that deficit of supply with a deficit of demand, and so we're having a big correction. And so for the number to get to 6, we'd have to have a massive correction, and during that period where that correction occurs is when it would really feel like a buyer's market. So that's why I think at 4 months of inventory, we would have it feel like a buyer's market. It's kind of like if you want to think about if you're a stock market guy or an economist person, gal, whatever. You think about, people talk about various yield curves inverting and how that's usually indicative of a recession coming. Well, it's not until the yield curve uninverts usually that the recession is actually here. It's kind of similar with this data. We're probably on the precipice of a buyer's market if this inventory creeps up, 0.8 months or something like that. Whereas the conventional wisdom would be 6 months, but it's kind of like at 4 months is when we would see that yield curve start inverting or start uninverting, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that made any sense. Kind of a weird comparison, and I did not plan to say that. Just kind of came to me, but maybe that made sense to someone. That's all we're going to cover today. There is some other data that we can sometimes get in the weeds with when it comes to the housing market in terms of whether townhomes are selling and whether 3 bedrooms or 3 bathrooms or whatever are selling more than others. Not going to get into that today. We'll get into that another time. But I appreciate you guys listening. We need to discuss one thing. I almost blew past Piper Insurance Group. And just a reminder, they are my go-to for homeowners, auto, and umbrella insurance. They are an independent agency, so they can quote with multiple different companies and bring you back the best possible rate that they find. They handle home, auto, and umbrella in multiple states, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and they can help you with flips, investment properties, rentals, ground-up new construction, residential, commercial, all of that. Their information is in the their contact information. Man, I'm struggling here. Their contact information is in the show notes, along with my own contact information. So please reach out to them for a quote on homeowners, auto, or umbrella. Please reach out to me with any of your real estate needs. Go to those show notes for that contact info. Please rate, review, subscribe. If you enjoy the show and don't want to miss future episodes, we will talk again next time.